Greetings, welcome to the show. This is the overview, and I'm your host, Brother Mbogo. Today I'm going to talk about this Commonwealth issue, because we know the Commonwealth is a term and so-called structure that has been there since the end of the colonial period. And you might wonder, what is this Commonwealth and what is the purpose of the Commonwealth? Some are even questioning whether it's a valid structure nowadays, because basically it's made up of former colonies of the British Empire. So why would countries still want to be a part of a structure that was oppressing them in previous years? So anyway, I'm going to look at the beginnings of the Commonwealth and some of the involvement of countries within the Commonwealth, and why countries have left, and well, some haven't even joined, but some have been suspended and so forth, and look at the structure, or the very, I would say, a weak structure of the Commonwealth. So, in terms of the beginning of the Commonwealth, according to the Council of Foreign Relations and their perception of what they see about the Commonwealth is a consensus-based intergovernmental organization with many objectives, including economic development, democracy building, free trade promoting, poverty reduction, health care programs, and cultural exchange. Its day-to-day operations, headed by a Secretary General. Currently the UK's Patricia Scotland, and she's appointed by the Commonwealth leaders. So they have their meetings every 2 years. The heads of governments have their meetings every 2 years, but also the foreign ministers and trade and finance ministers also meet periodically. So the so-called secretariat, I'll talk about that more later on, provides training and technical assistance to members, and is observed elections around the Commonwealth countries. It is something you always hear about, Commonwealth observers attending so-called democratic elections in the Commonwealth countries. So what is, I'll deal with that later on. The idea of limited self-government for some British colonies, this is dealing with the beginnings of the Commonwealth in terms of the British Empire allowing certain colonized territories, basically the white-owned, white-dominated territories such as Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and so forth, to have more self-governance. So this Lord Durham in 1839, almost you could say recommended or made a request, according to the report. So they were requesting more responsible self-governance for Canada, so that it could elect its own cabinet of ministers chosen by the Canadians themselves, or these are the white Canadians, I would say. So it would depend primarily on support by the Colonial Legislative Assembly for its tenure of ministerial office decisions. In terms of foreign affairs, the British government would still be in charge of those things. They would just manage themselves internally. So over time, from that period, the other white-led colonial structures began to become more independent from the British government. And these more independent groupings were called dominions. So they attended their first conference in 1887. These semi-independent states or semi-independent territories. So this was Canada, as I was saying, Australia, New Zealand, and Cape Colony, and Natal in South Africa. So later on, they obtained almost complete control over their internal affairs, so that in 1907 they were granted the new status of, or after that period, I should say, in 1910, South Africa as a whole joined the so-called status of dominions within the Commonwealth. After World War I in 1918, this is according to the Encyclopedia Britannica. I'm just giving some basic background to the Commonwealth. After World War I ended in 1918, the Dominions signed a peace treaty for themselves and joined the newly formed League of Nations as fully independent nations equal to Britain. See, these are the white-led colonies that became fully independent after World War I. And I'll mention later on, there's a, I think it's from the, no, it's not from Africa Report, the Voices of Color website, where they mention that the Balfour Declaration, this is the declaration that relates to the formation of Israel, that also played a role in the formation of the British Commonwealth. So here from the Voices of Colour side, the Commonwealth was born out of the British Empire, as I said. In the fall of 1926, the Prime Ministers of Britain and its dominions, the countries I just mentioned, agreed that all nations were equal in status, in no way subordinate to one another in any aspect of domestic or external affairs. Thus these territories, not the African and Asian territories, because they had not yet joined the Commonwealth. Then it mentions here the Balfour Declaration, as the agreement was called, was the launching pad for the British Commonwealth of Nations. So this Colonial Declaration, which was used to form the State of Israel, also played a role in the formation of the British Commonwealth. So you could argue that Israel is also a colonial state, even though the people there have some level of independence. But the colonial powers played a role. Obviously they did, because they colonized the land that they call Palestine, or the old region of the Arab world, and then they gave out that piece of land to the Jews, of the European Jews, basically. So in terms of later on, when the Global South countries began to join, you find that the Africa Report here is asking the question of why. Why would countries that were colonized by a certain power, after gaining independence from that power, agree to join a group in which that power, that is the British government or British monarchy, was still the leader of that group? There are some kind of ties, and one of the arguments that they make in the report is that because all of the leaders of these newly independent states were educated in Britain, that created some kind of bind or tie towards the British Empire and the royal family and Britain itself, which led them to feel that they needed to remain in some kind of, with some kind of link to the empire. So the first of these was the leader of India, Jawaharlal Nehru, who studied at Harrow Public School and Cambridge University. Then Mohammed Jinnah of Pakistan also studied in the UK. Then you also have the African leaders such as Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana. When Ghana was made independent, it also joined the Commonwealth, as well as Tanzania, Zambia, and other African countries, and Kenya. So all the African leaders, all of them had studied in the UK. So, you know, when a territory has been under the dominion of a particular power, hegemonic power, for a number of years, possibly, it would seem that it's very difficult for them to completely break ties with Britain. Maybe they saw some kind of economic benefit from these ties, which I'll mention later on, but there were not really any economic benefits from being part of the Commonwealth, even up to today. So in terms of countries that didn't actually join the Commonwealth, first I'll mention this idea of suspension, as some countries were suspended, like Zimbabwe. I think it was in the 1990s. So suspension is the most serious punishment that can be administered to members of the Commonwealth, because it has no real legal structure to do anything else. And 5 countries have been suspended from the Commonwealth since the inception of the group. The first of these was in 1987. It was Fiji, and then Pakistan, Zimbabwe, as I mentioned, was also suspended, or I think Zimbabwe is still not a member of the Commonwealth. And then you had countries which didn't actually join the Commonwealth, like the Republic of Ireland, Myanmar, and countries in the Middle East that were under British dominion for a while, but when they gained their independence, they didn't join the Commonwealth. Even countries like Cameroon joined later on. They gained their, but Cameroon's case is that it was part British, part French. So that may have been a reason why later on it joined later on and not straight away. But Pakistan, for one, was suspended because it left at first because Bangladesh had been accepted into the Commonwealth, or Bangladesh was recognized as a country, so Pakistan left the Commonwealth and rejoined later on. But then it was also suspended because there was a coup. And when there's a coup in a particular country and there's no longer a European-style democracy, then you'll find that they'll be excluded from the Commonwealth. So those are the groups that have joined and left the Commonwealth, basically. So now I'll look at, I'll ask the question, I should say, what are the real benefits of being part of the Commonwealth? And according to certain sites or report, for example, the Africa report, as I mentioned earlier, being part of the Commonwealth has no real benefit. So let me adjust this here. So the question is asking, is it still relevant? The Commonwealth as currently constituted is not a particularly effective organization. Membership carries few economic benefits, and unless one believes the rather flimsy research from the Secretariat. So the Secretariat is saying basically that there are economic benefits to being part of the Commonwealth, but the report here is saying that there's no real evidence of that. Even the Secretariat is under question under the leadership at the time as to whether there's some kind of misuse of funding that it receives. Anyway, let me continue. So that's one. I'll be dealing more with the questions around the Commonwealth. And here, I'm going to look at a particular country because, you know, the Commonwealth is there. All the many African countries that were colonized by Britain are part of the Commonwealth. Yet, Britain still has companies or British registered companies that are exploiting resources and behaving badly in the Commonwealth countries that are within the Commonwealth, the African countries that I'll focus on mainly here, that are a part of the Commonwealth. So according to this, from the Global Witness website, the 110-page report entitled Faced with a Gun, What Can You Do? Details how companies are buying from suppliers who trade in minerals from the warring parties. This is in the Congo. Many mining areas in eastern DRC are controlled by rebels and the National Army who violently exploit civilians to retain access to valuable minerals, including cassiterite, that's tin ore, coltan, gold. Coltan and cassiterite are used to make mobile phones, computers, and other electronics, among other things. So they're still active in the Congo, but I'll be talking about Glencore in a minute. These are three, I think, UK companies: Anglo-American, Acacia Mining, and Glencore, and Rio Tinto, 4 companies, Rio Tinto, that are still have a strong presence on the continent. Glencore itself is the world's largest commodity trader, according to, this is the Africa report again, and it's headquartered in Switzerland, but it has a UK branch overseas, and its UK branch is concentrated on oil and gas. And it has been accused, no, I mentioned the countries that it's involved with first: Democratic Republic of Congo, Nigeria, Brazil, Ivory Coast, Cameroon, Equatorial Guinea, and also Venezuela. In the DRC, Glencore currently owns 2 copper mines and a cobalt, 2 copper and a cobalt mines in eastern Congo. And these are like the Mutunda mine is a subsidiary of Glencore. So what it does, it forms subsidiaries maybe with African names. So you'd think that it's an African company, but it's actually owned by Glencore. So there's an investigation in December of 2022 regarding corruption and bribe paying by Glencore, and there was a settlement of 180 billion with the DRC for all future and past alleged acts of corruption. So these acts of corruption took place between 2007 and 2018. And in Nigeria, a similar case of corruption by Glencore, and they were also fined and taken to court. The sentence to pay, in the British court this is, to pay 280 million in financial penalties to the UK, and this included 183 million fine, 93 million confiscated, and 4 million in legal costs. So a week before it was sentenced, Nigeria applied to the court for compensation, claiming status as a victim of the corporate offending. However, the London court found that third parties like Nigeria do not have a standing to seek. So even though the fraud and bribery and whatever corruption took place in Nigeria, the Nigeria itself didn't have a claim in the British court to gain some kind of compensation. Only Britain, in this case, had a right to make a claim in this particular court against Glencore. But I'm quite sure this is a biased case because the offense took place in Nigeria. Why shouldn't they be able to claim in a British court against a British registered company for the fraud and corruption that took place in their country? So that's a look at some of the companies that have been involved. One main company also mentioned the names of certain companies that were involved in the extraction. I was looking for information about the wealth that they had actually gained from exploiting resources in the different African countries that are part of the Commonwealth, but that's a bit difficult to find. I think I'll do another program and explain that. In terms of the Commonwealth having any real legal status or any legal power in terms of trade and human rights and such things, they have to refer to the United Nations Charter on Human Rights, and in terms of trade, they have to refer to the World Trade Organization. They don't have any formal trade agreements for Commonwealth countries for them to trade with each other. They can only come to a consensus basically about how they are going to trade with each other. They can't form formal agreements. So in that sense, that there's a weakness there in how much they can influence the activities of a country. So this is in relation to human rights. This is part of the Singapore Declaration. Every 2 years when they meet, they create a declaration. This declaration, the Singapore Declaration, was made in 1971. It's regarding human rights. We believe in the liberty of the individual and equal rights for all citizens, regardless of race, color, creed, or political belief. I'm not going to finish the rest of it, but basically they're defending this Western concept of individual rights and not defending the concept of human rights and duties, which is more present in global South societies. So this individualistic mindset of the West is very influential, not only in the United Nations, but in terms of the Commonwealth, the British-led Commonwealth, in which Western values seem to be the primary leading framework in how the organization or the grouping actually behaves. And in terms of trade, a strong, credible working GATT. GATT is the General Agreements on Trade and Tariffs, which was started in 1944 at the Bretton Woods Conference. The conference created the World Trade Organization and the IMF as two organizations. It also was supposed to create a world, I think it was called the International Trade Organization at the time, but in the interim it formed the GATT, which involved mainly Western countries. So the World Trade Organization as we know it today was formed in 1994. And you'll find that during the period from GATT up to 1994, you'd find that there's mainly Western countries that were involved in GATT. Global South countries did join, but they were not so active. The large amount of countries that are a member of the World Trade Organization at the moment that you find were not part of the GATT. There are a lot of issues around whether they have this thing called the Green Room. A Green Room meetings is when a group of countries meet, or finance ministers of a countries meet, and the decision that's made within that group will now apply to the whole of the World Trade Organization or the GATT membership. So what they used to do, the Europeans used to do, is to have their arrange their meetings in secret, and this secretly arranged meeting would have the mainly Western leaders meeting and discussing and coming to a conclusion or resolution about something to their favor, to their benefit, and not include Global South members. And to some extent what they would also do is not tell the Global South members that the meeting was taking place, or they would mislead the Global South member to send them to a wrong location. So when they later on find the proper location, the meeting has already ended. So this is the World Trade Organization, or the GATT. Structures are found that are Western dominated, but you'll find that the West still wants to control how the world is run. So even the groups like the Commonwealth are structures that are dominated by Western powers. So in terms of criticisms now of the Commonwealth, despite these actions, some analysis have highlighted the Commonwealth Institute structure as it has few concrete mechanisms to influence its members' behavior, as I said, often relying on peer pressure and moral authority. No legal structures that give punishment, for example, against those countries that don't go according to what they're supposed to. And well, that's one of the negatives, but the last two sections I'm looking at, this is the last section looking at the negatives of the Commonwealth. And according to The Guardian, this is just an article in the Guardian newspaper questioning the value of the Commonwealth. The Commonwealth's ability to address critical issues such as poverty, inequality, corruption, and the climate crisis has been questioned as it has failed to take concrete actions to deliver. Well, it has no real power to take concrete actions. It has no legal structure to force countries, its members, to abide by certain of the stipulations that it might discuss in its conferences or in its declarations. And also countries, Caribbean countries in particular, who still add the Queen of England as the head of state, or the royal family, British royal family as the head of state, have decided, well, Barbados is mentioned here as a country that is no longer going to have the Queen as head of state. And Jamaica also is in line with that thinking, although they have not yet gone through the process. So the Commonwealth itself is a structure which the members themselves are now questioning in terms of their membership. And those who had the royal family as their head of state have decided that now is the time to move away and become more independent, which they should do. Why would they still want to have this royal family that has colonized them as the leader, the influencer in terms of rights and how they should operate in the world, when there's no real benefit to this idea? So that's the basic look at the Commonwealth and its structure, and what's happening within the Commonwealth, and whether it actually benefits these countries that are its members. So that's it for now.